was incredibly windy this morning, so much so that the dogs didn't want to go outside, and pretty much everything that was nailed down last night is all over the place. Trying to stay straight on PCH is even a challenge. This was not in my phone. It was not forecast in the weather. I don't know what's going on. The wind god is pissed and he's blowing like crazy. Anyway, it doesn't really matter because I'm headed south on PCH. I'm going again to the Automobile Driving Museum. Today, we're looking at cars from 1940 to 1950, and we're gonna drive something cool. I have no idea what it is. Ken's gonna meet me there, but the only cars they have there are cool cars, so it's gonna be fun. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Are you going to give us a little historical journey today?
Well, we're hoping to enrich your life.
It wouldn't take much. You got any chocolate on hand?
No, not today.
Okay, so what are we focusing on today?
Today we're going to focus on immediate pre-war and immediate post-war, and we're going to talk a little bit about the effect of the war on the American automobile industry.
World War II. Just to clarify.
That's the one.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Welcome back to the Automobile Driving Museum. Today, we're going to take you on a tour of what happened in the American automobile industry from about 1940 through up to 1950. To start that ball rolling, I'm sitting here in front of a 1941 Cadillac. By 1941, Cadillac was emerging as the premier luxury car. It had not been that before. That spot was held by Packard, sometimes by Lincoln, sometimes by Chrysler, and sometimes by some of those obscure makers that left us during the Depression. But by 1941, Cadillac was pretty much it. They had a new V8 engine in this car, and it stayed in all the Cadillac cars through 1948. Up to this point, we had vertical grills, and if you remember last time, we looked at the 39 Cadillac, which still had a vertical grill. We also have fenders and hood lines which are approaching the same level. By 1950s, the fenders and the hood were at the same level. This is a design innovation which is born right around now. Another important thing to focus on with the 41 Cadillac is what happens next. Because what happens next is profoundly important to the American automobile industry. Recall that Hitler invaded Poland in September of 1939. We were making war material, but not for ourselves, because we weren't involved in the war at that point. However, we soon would be. Remember Pearl Harbor, as the saying goes. There were 3 million automobiles made in this country in 1941. Between 1942 and 1945, there was 139 more. That's it. Because the entire automobile industry shifted after Pearl Harbor to war material production. And it shifted with alarming speed. President Roosevelt declared that the guy who wins the war is the guy who can make airplanes faster than the other guys can shoot them down. We did that. How we did it was the American industry, the automotive industry, already the industrial engine of the world, geared up for wartime production. I think the grandest example of how effectively they did that was Henry Ford got the contract to build the B-24 Liberator bomber in a factory that didn't exist at the time he got the contract. So he built the famous Willow Run factory in less than a year to build the B-24 Liberator bomber. The assembly line was a mile long, and it had a 90-degree turn in it. The reason for the 90-degree turn was Ford didn't want to go into the next county, so he had to pay their tax too. So he just imagined that. So he turned an assembly line a mile long, 90 degrees. And by the end of the war in 1945, he was building a Liberator bomber with 1.5 million parts every 93 minutes. If you think about that, it's astonishing. The 41 Ford had 15,000 parts. All the men were going to war. So that left the men who couldn't go to war for whatever reason, or the women. 8 million women went to work in the defense industry. Rosie the Riveter, you've heard that term, was born. And something occurred in the Willow Run factory that had rarely occurred before, and that was the invention of the woman's restroom. We're standing in front of a 41 Packard ambulance, and although this was one of the 3 million cars built in 1941, it would have been impressed into service, at least domestically, for the war effort to transport patients, say, between hospitals or acute care facilities. This Packard is big, it's long, it's powerful, and its body is custom built by a commercial car builder named Healey on a Packard chassis. Since the car is built for civilian use, one would wonder how it ended up in a military use. And the answer to that is pretty simple. It was drafted, if you will, into the war effort and would have been used on bases, at military hospitals, at airports to pick up and transfer the returning wounded. Sitting in front of a 47 Chrysler convertible. What's interesting about this is that in 1945, the war ended. The automobile industry got back into automobile production even faster than it went out of automobile production. But it did so by dusting off the tooling for the 1941 and 42 models. It wouldn't be until 1946 that the first of the automakers, which I recall is Studebaker, will produce a brand new car not based on pre-war tooling. It would take Chrysler several more years before they got to that point. Now, if you look at the styling cues in this 47 Chrysler, you see some of the same things I mentioned with the 41 Cadillac. You see the fenders coming up, the hood going down, and you see the disappearance of the vertical grille. Those tendencies will be refined a little later when we take a ride in our 46 Studebaker, which was one of the first truly post-war designs. Chrysler was charged with building a large gun tractor in 1942. The first ones it built took 450 man-hours. By the time they reached the end of the war, they were building that same gun tractor in 10. This industry is learning. It's learning to shift on the fly or modify on the fly. That ability gave rise to the horsepower race, the color race, and planned obsolescence that we saw in the 1950s, and we'll maybe see in a future episode.
We're headed out. We're going to go. What year's the Studebaker?
46.
We're going to take a 46 Studebaker, and we're going to take it with Tom, with Ken, and Greg is over there. I'm glad you're looking at that car over there. If you weren't sure about it, it's an MG.
Actually, I was looking at it at It's an Austin Healey.
This one's an Austin Healey? MG Austin Healey. You can easily see the difference. One's blue, one's red. Morgan, MG, Austin Healey, for those who don't know. Where are they? There they are. Okay, really fun time hanging out with the guys at the museum. Those guys are so fun to work with. But big thanks to Tom, incredibly knowledgeable guy, a wealth of information about automotive history and all through the years. Don't go anywhere, Tom. I got more questions for you. But always fun hanging out at that museum. You guys should go if you're ever in the area, or if you happen to be in the area. I've met so many people that live in Southern California that have had no idea this museum was even here. Now you do. Keep watching because there's cool stuff coming. 50s to 60s, 60s to 70s. Really good time, as I mentioned. Big thanks to everybody. Thanks to you guys for watching. I hope you're enjoying the cool cars, the old cars. If you haven't seen them all, you got to go back through the vlog and just kind of look for the ones for the Automobile Driving Museum or the Peterson Museum. We're going to be doing the Mullins Museum and the Murphy and the Nethercutt, the Blackhawk. We're going to do all those museums. They're just really fun to hang out and check out those cars. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. This is vlog 279. Seriously. Okay, that's it, guys. We will see you tomorrow.